so glad that you're tuning in today. As we just enter into a time of worship, I encourage you to turn your hearts and your eyes to Him. God, we thank you that you are good, that you are faithful in every season. God, thank you that your love extends so far beyond our own comprehension. So today, God, I pray that as we enter in, as we gather together online as a community, would your presence, would your spirit just lead us today? Because you picked me up when I was down, set my feet on the solid ground. You're giving me a song to sing, in you I trust and I believe. You picked me up when I was down, set my feet on the solid. Yeah, giving me a song to sing. One more time, you picked me up, you picked me up. God, we love you, and we thank you for your faithfulness in every season, God. Cause I love you, Lord, when your mercy never fails me. In all my days, and I've been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, and I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And I love your voice, and you have led me through the fire, darkest night, and you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God all my life. Oh, all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am and you are holy. You're holy. You are you, Lord God Almighty. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Sing it out. You are holy. Holy. You are you, Lord God Almighty. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. You are holy. You're holy. Are you, Lord God Almighty? Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Yes, Jesus. We just turn our eyes to you. We just take a moment just to rest our hearts. And we thank you that there's no one like you. You're holy. You're holy. And are you, Lord God Almighty? And worthy is the Lamb. And worthy is the Lamb. Amen. God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant, faithful promises. And time again, you have proven you do just what you say. And though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast. And let my heart learn when you speak your word, it will come to pass. We sing great, and great is faithful and you are good. In every season, God, we just take a second just to remember your faithfulness. God, even this past season, Lord, through all the trials, through all the questioning, through all the pain, God, we know that you've been faithful time and time again. So God, as we step into this next season, even as a community, God, I pray that you would give us eyes of faith to see something new, to see what you're doing, to partner with you in a new way, Jesus. We love you, and we thank you. Hey, we're so glad that you're turning in to Newsong live stream today. I just want to say welcome. And right now, this is typically where we do a meet and greet. So I encourage you, if you're online or if you're with somebody, just turn to whoever you're next to and give them a hug. If you're online and you're by yourself, give us a like, give us a comment. You can share this stream. We're so glad that we have technology and we have the ability to engage together as a community online. We're so glad that you're tuning in today.
Hey, Newsong. This is Jimmy Bay, and I'm the youth pastor here, and I'm so excited to connect with you today. Just got a couple announcements for you guys today, but before I get into that, I just wanted to share with you guys a trip that I recently took. Just this past week, or a week ago now, I actually went to Egypt, and it was kind of low-key because I don't know if you guys know, but Christianity is on the low-key over there in that country. But I got to speak to the youth there for a missions conference, and I was just so blown away by how much the Holy Spirit is moving in that country and just blessing the youth. And one thing that I was so encouraged by over there was how active they are in their faith. Because it is a little bit persecuted over there, they have to be a little bit covert in the way they operate. But one thing that I was so blessed by was how they are so active in giving to the refugees. They just walk around their community and they find areas where the refugees are hiding. And children without parents are hiding in mausoleums and cemeteries. And what they do is they just go and they just give food. And one thing that I was so encouraged by was their reputation in that area became the ones who bring food. The refugee children from Sudan, they would all come out of the mausoleums and they would say, the Christians are here, they're with the food. And they have a reputation for bringing the food. And one thing that I got to talk to the leaders about was how to do food distribution well, because they heard about Newsong and they heard about the work that Maribel and the local global team are doing. And the first thing I told them is, you guys need to find a Maribel, someone who knows the community, someone who is whose heart is about blessing the community. And I share all of that and I bring that up because I was able to just impart the little bit of Newsong wisdom that I was able to gain this past year with them. And they were just so blessed, and they have all these new strategies and organizational tips that they want to use to bless the community of refugees there. Now, the reason why I say all of that is because I truly believe in everything that Newsong does. As a community, the giving, the food distribution, everything that we do, we are funneling all of our resources into blessing the immediate community around us and worldwide. And so I say all of that to share with you, if you guys want to support the work that we are doing in building up the world and building up the community with the food distribution and all of that, you can give by texting NSGIVE to 81411, or you can go to newsong.net/give. And you can participate and you can give and you can contribute to everything that we're doing here. And I slightly want to share a separate story. The Lyft ride that I took coming back home from the airport, it was particularly interesting because my Lyft driver, he asked me if I was famous. And I was like, what? No, I'm not famous. And some way or another, we got onto the topic of religion. And he started telling me, he was like, hey man, churches are a scam. And he had no idea I was a pastor. And I was like, interesting, tell me more. And he was like, churches are a business. They just want your money. And I was like, come on, man, there's got to be some churches out there that aren't for our money. And he was like, no, the second you stop giving, they will not be welcoming. They will not care about you. And so I wanted to take a moment aside and say, hey, brother, if you're listening today, by no means do you need to give. We want to bless you, all right? In fact, I gave him a good tip so that he would know that there was no strings attached. But what I wanted to say is, if you're just listening, if you're just visiting for the first time, please feel no pressure to give. And even if you're a committed member here, please feel no pressure to give and to develop this mindset that church is a business or a scam or a Ponzi scheme or anything like that. No, we just want to build up the resources in order to fund all of the works to provide for the community. And if you feel like it's not something that you can get behind, please, by any means, feel no need to give. With that being said, I want to go on to some of the other announcements that we have for this week. Next Sunday, we have something called Awaken at Newsong. And if you're a first-timer and you're just looking for a way to get connected with community or get plugged in, we have a session next Sunday at 3 p.m. called Awaken. If you want to join, please sign up. Pastor Dave is going to be sharing some wisdom, some life principles, and also just a way to get connected with some of the other first-timers or other community members. So please check that out. Awaken at 3 p.m. next week. Two other things that we have going on this week. Women's Bible study is back on Tuesday, but you do need to sign up for that before tomorrow. So get on that ASAP. I'm sure there are going to be some links floating around. You can check out our link tree. All of those resources will be there. Also, we have something called Couples Enrich, which is going to be next Sunday as well. And if you're dating, if you're engaged, if you're married, this Couples Enrich session is going to be super beneficial for you. With that being said, I want to introduce our speaker for today. As you guys all know, he needs no introduction. Pastor Dave is going to be sharing with us some life wisdom and some principles. And suffice to say, October, right, the next month coming up is going to be a jam-packed month, and he's going to be sharing a ton of wisdom on how we're going to be moving forward as a church. Now, before we go to Pastor Dave, I wanted to read the passage that we're going to be studying out of today. So if you want to join with me, turn to Luke chapter 10, and I'll be reading out of the NLT translation from verse 25 to verse 37. And these are some life principles that we really operate as a church, as a community. And so if you guys could join with me, I'll be reading Luke chapter 10, verse 25 to 37. And if you're wondering why I'm lagging so much, it's because I'm a youth pastor. It takes them a long time to find the Bible passages. So I do these things to slow it down a little bit. And I'll be reading with us. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw that man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise."
Thanks, Jimmy. Have you lately had this inner compulsion to get back to normal? If you're like a lot of people, that's a default thing. You want to get back to those rhythms again. But you often wonder, and you'll cry out to God, why do I still have to go through this? Why is this so long, and why is this so much more painful than I could have imagined? When I was thinking about this question this past week, I came to the conclusion that maybe we don't want to go back to normal. Maybe things should be different. Maybe there's some things that we're discovering that are quite beautiful. Things that we did when we were younger or things that we imagined, we're now able to do. For example, I'm cooking now. I'm making some pretty dang good food. Talk to my family about it, but I'm making some bom de queijo, which is that Brazilian cheese bread. Some of you have seen that online. I was waiting usually to go to Brazil to eat that. Well, now I can eat it in my own house, and it doesn't take me long. I don't even need to look at the recipe. I'm making some really good carrot cake. I love carrot cake, and I make it like the Korean style, which is, not too sweet. Leave out like half the sugar, and it is so good. So I'm cooking. I thought about when I was younger, I did it all the time, but my mom kicked me out of the kitchen. That's why I didn't cook as much. Not only am I cooking, I'm washing dishes. Yep, washing dishes. And I want to do it. Why? Well, because this COVID period of time, some of the companies I also work with, they've asked me to lead them in some mindfulness meditation exercises. And I found out a lot of these things, you just have to start breathing deeply, and then you're focused not on the future, but the present. You're trying to feel your body, what's going on in your head, and you do a body scan. You're smelling your surroundings, you're noticing the wind, whether it's blowing on your face or not. And I noticed these exercises cause me to be present, to be in the now. And then, so these exercises are somewhat pedantic, and they seem to be quite simple. I noticed how when I started washing dishes, when I had this one urge to be extra, servant-like in the house one day. And as I was doing, I said, wow, this reminds me of the mindfulness exercise. It forced me to be present. So I'm actually enjoying washing dishes. And I like seeing the kitchen clean. Maybe, just maybe, we don't want to go back to normal. Maybe there's some things that are good. Even with Zoom, right? Everybody's complaining, man, I'm having Zoom fatigue. But seriously, imagine the life down the road where you don't have to travel during the week to go to a meeting at night, when you've already been traveling all day long. Imagine your meetings taking half the time, where you don't have to get in the car and prepare for that moment. I think it's okay to have a Zoom meeting with a lot of the things that we have. Because there's usually just conversational pieces that are agenda items that we can work through really fast. I found that my Zoom calls forced me to be more efficient, more effective, get to the point. So maybe, again, we don't want to go back to normal. This inner conflict that I've been feeling, I'm sure you've been feeling it too. You're desiring to get back to that place which seems like it was a good place, but when you think about it, maybe it wasn't so good. This is true even with church. Right now, I'm sure a lot of pastors and leaders around the country and world are feeling, man, we got to get back to normal again. And so our quick default reaction is to do services. And so we're starting to do services. You'll see my friends, and I have really good colleagues, and they're great men and women. They're starting to do services again. And they're basically the same, but there's more social distancing. But they're going back to the singing. They're going back to listening to a sermon. And they're going back to even hey, let's do small groups and have Bible study. All that is great stuff. But the more I considered this, I said, I wonder, has this become the way we define worship around the world? That we would reduce it to singing, to listening to one person give a sermon, and then maybe if we're really deep, we're going to have a Bible study where we talk about the Word. And I said, does God really want us to go back to that when worship may be much more full than that? It may be more broad than that definition of it, because that definition is in a box, it's in one location, and it's with one person giving a message, and it's just us singing in a stationary place. Maybe there's a broader picture of worship. So as I was considering these things, I said, are we supposed to go back to norm? I was conflicted. I said, for some reason, I don't think we're supposed to go back to normal. There's something different. It's not that we can't sing, listen to a good message, and have Bible studies, but is there possibly something more that God wants us to really look at? Is there something deeper, something fuller that he wants us to experience? Not again to cast guilt or to make us feel like we're out of context or just uncomfortable, but he has something that's going to help us to have more joy, to create more life. So what it came to was this. As I was meditating on it, I suddenly realized I know what's bothering me. I know what it is. And maybe if you think about it, it's you too. How could we go back to normal when we see society like it is? When we're starting to see the fissures in the racial injustice, and our black and brown brothers and sisters, and even our Asian family members, them still being marginalized, still being hurt and abused. Is that something we're just supposed to lay aside and not talk about and just go back to normal? Is all the actions and energy that we're putting on into our Sunday gatherings and our Sunday focus, what if we put those resources into the city, into dealing with the people that are hurting? And then my mind went to that scripture that Jimmy read. And I know we talked about this. It was a key moment in Newsong a few months ago when we talked about Black Lives Matter and we talked about the LGBTQ communities and how love supersedes the law and how we're supposed to go after it, like the Samaritan. But I looked at this again. I said, it applies even to this day. And it's a passage that we can't just turn away from. When you think about this passage, I was reminded about, again, the religious teacher, the religious leader. When he saw the Jewish person on the side of the road who had gotten beaten up when it was about to die, he stayed on his side of the road. He still had work to do. He went back to normal. He saw it for a moment, but didn't strike his conscience. He didn't change his game. He stayed on his side of the road. He still had to go back to normal. Nothing could interrupt his purpose, he felt, his focus, which was a good thing. It was a good thing to worship God. It's a good thing to share about God. But he just stayed to the normal path. And then you looked at the ones that he would maybe mentor, the temple assistant in that same passage. So someone who was still religious, he goes a little bit further than his teacher, right? And he looks, he pauses, but then he goes back to his same old normal again. And so he's really following his mentor. And I feel, man, God, this is such a perfect picture of the way I believe, if we're not careful, we as those who know Jesus or those who do church commonly, we'll see something and we'll know it's painful and we know it hurts somebody, but then we don't dwell upon it. We don't take time to listen and pause. We just immediately gravitate to the default, going back to, say it with me, the norm, normal. What I saw the Samaritan do, and when you look at this passage, you can tell it's a racial context because there's a highlighting of the Samaritan who's the half Jew, half Gentile. And then you have the Jewish one, which was like the power culture. They're the ones who had authority and they knew the law. They would memorize books of the Bible. But what was significant was how Jesus highlighted the Samaritan, the one who was considered the outcast amongst the Jewish population. He would be, or she would be like the hero that would come and love the Jewish person. What's extraordinary about this passage is how the Samaritan did not go back to his norm. I imagine this was his normal path, that he would go do business on a regular basis. It was his routine. But when he saw the Jewish person hurting, the Jewish person about to die, someone had abused him and hurt him, he had to stop. He could not go on. It disturbed him enough that he stopped the normal routine and he spent time and he bandaged the wounds of the one who was hurting. He took personal responsibility. He didn't let someone else do it. He did it in that moment. He was so moved by it, it's like he got lost in it. It's like if your son or your daughter or your friend is hurt, you immediately stop because that's someone who's close to you. He had that same feeling for this individual. And then not only that, we see him then putting him on his own donkey, going the extra mile, staying with him that night. And then he gave the innkeeper some money to continue taking care of, again, over and beyond. But he didn't leave. He stopped what he was doing. So man, this has struck me like a ton of bricks this past week. I said, that's what the church needs to do. Maybe, we can do these things of singing and listening to a sermon again, coming back and gathering, but maybe there's a fuller picture of worship. Unfortunately, maybe we've defined our worship in our modern day as coming to Sunday for 2 hours, sitting in a pew or a chair and listening to the message, singing some songs, and then say hi to some people, and then we're out. When worship was meant to be experienced much more fully. And I said, maybe, just maybe, God is giving us a gift in the midst of a really horrific time to exercise our muscles of worship that we've not used as effectively as we need to. Because our typical muscles of worship have been our mouths, where someone's talking, or it's our ears where we listen. But our bodies are still, our other parts of our body is atrophying. We're not utilizing it. And God said, hey, I want you to be more than just about talk. I want you to be more than about just declaration and speaking and forcing your language upon someone, or you just sitting and listening. I want you to understand what worship really is. And then this passage from Luke, it just hit me again. When this guy asked, like, what should I do? He came with Jesus with this question, and he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And I said, man, that's worship. You see, worship's not 2 hours just on Sunday in a building. It's with all of ourselves 24/7. So the huge question that we can experience right now is, what does worship look like when we're not in a building or we can't gather on Sundays? I guess that's not bad, but how can we exercise this now and learn to experience God in worship every day, even when we can't meet in a building? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. It's about being. You see, it's about being present in a moment wherever I am, experiencing the presence of God. It's knowing that as I just work effectively, as I do some of these what's considered menial tasks, I'm reflecting the presence of God and I can experience Him. Unfortunately, maybe, I'm like a lot of you, and I have to admit it, I'm known like as this visionary person, right? And so sometimes unknowingly, you can try to live up to that stereotype. And so you're constantly thinking, okay, that's who I am, and then you're planning your activities and your space to fulfill that stereotype or that label that you have. So anyways, I'm typically very future. But what I found about this COVID period and this pandemic is it's forced me to see things now. It's slowed me down. I'm not traveling as much. And I'm able to see beauty all around me. I'm able to connect with people and do things I haven't done before. The gift is teaching me how to be, not just to be future-oriented. I shared with you before, this thought that, I asked myself, well, what triggers me always to be so future? And I think it's because of my past. When I was going through the hard times with my family, with my mom and my dad divorcing and the separation, the depressions, all the crazy stuff that happened in our home, I just put myself on this future-oriented thought that, it really sucks right now. It's horrible. So someday when I get married, someday when I get a job, someday when I move. So I was always about this someday, this future orientation. And the truth is, I didn't stop. I was so future-oriented that I could not enjoy a moment. I couldn't smell the beauty all around me. I couldn't see it. In fact, celebrations were not normal for me. I would just want to get through it. Even vacations, I'm thinking about things that are going to happen after the vacation. My mind was rushing to what's ahead. When I think God wants to teach us like, hey, there's a moment right now where you can experience my presence. And you can lean in me, you can enjoy me. And even as you're enjoying me, watch what happens where the effect of your relationship with me is going to impact a ton of people around you. The joy that you have in experiencing my presence will shift things. So it's about being. And I know, because sometimes it's awkward, really awkward, because you'll have well-meaning Christian friends say, why don't you just preach Jesus? I mean, this is what this time's all about. Just preach Jesus. I mean, get back to the simplicity of the gospel, they'll say, which means like the truth of God, the wonderful good news of God. Just get back to the simplicity of it all. And I said, yes, and. You see, again, the muscle that we've developed is we preach Jesus all the time. We hear people preaching about it. We hear people like selling Jesus and how they witness. Or there's these bait and switches that we do. We're nice to people, so that. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's not just simply about, again, exercising the muscle of our lips, but worshiping God with our life. What does that really look like? So if you dig deeper into the scriptures, this is really great text from Isaiah chapter 58. And he defines what worship is beyond just being. I mean, he breaks it down. Check it out. This is what he says. Shout with the voice of a trumpet blast. Shout aloud. Don't be timid. Tell my people Israel of their sins. Yet they act so pious. They come to the temple every day, and they seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a righteous nation that would never abandon the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want to be near me. Again, all this is about lips, right? It's about praying even. So prayer's good, talking about God's good. But look what he says in verse 3. He says, they say, we have fasted before you. Why aren't you impressed, God? We've been very hard on ourselves, and you don't even notice it. Because if we're honest, by the way, what would we say is the hardest Christian discipline to do? It's probably fasting. I mean, to deprive yourselves of food, right? So they're taking a pretty hard course to really showing their love for God by fasting. But look what he says here. He says, I will tell you why, he responds. It's because you are fasting to please yourselves. And even when you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. What good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarreling? This kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with me. You humble yourselves by going through the motions of penance. You bow your heads like reeds bending in the wind. You dress in burlap and cover yourselves with ashes. Is this what you call fasting? Do you really think this will please the Lord? No, this is the kind of fasting I want. Now listen to this, because here is worship. It says, free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free. And remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry. And give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them. And I love this line. And don't hide from the relatives who need your help. Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. You know what worship is? Worship is not only about learning how to do this as a lifestyle. Not in a religious way where you're preaching at people and feeling that's the most effective way, but using these other muscles of your life. And specifically in Isaiah 58, what do we see it being? One word: justice. Justice. See, justice is at the heart of our worship. You can't see someone on the side of the road who's getting beaten and abused and is about to die and just go back to normal. You can't do it. Man, if you really know the heart of God, you got to stop. Jesus did that himself, right? He's in heaven. He didn't have to leave the throne of the universe to come down to this earth, but he paused. He disrupted his routines, and he came and he spent time with us, and he got subjected to cruelty, to horrific tactics by man, and betrayals and abuse, and then ultimately a killing. Our calling is not just to be, it's to be people of justice. And you go, well, that's just an Old Testament thing, man. I go, no. If you look at James chapter 1, verse 27, Look at what James says. He says, pure and genuine worship or religion in the sight of God, the Father, means what? It's caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. You see, he breaks it down. It's not a very pretty picture, right? Because it's easier to think, man, I'd rather sit in the comforts of air conditioning and a place with all my friends, and sing some songs, and then, hear a great sermon, get some chills, be inspired. And then again, if I go really deep, I'm going to get with those same friends one more time during the week and have a Bible study. To me, all that's really good, right? But he's saying, hey, what good is all that? What's good with all the fasting and stuff and the way you define worship if you're not doing what I consider true religion? If you're not really doing what I consider worship, and what is that? It's loving those who've been oppressed. It's loving those who've been put along the side of the road, who have someone's knees on their necks. We can't stop and just go back to normal again. Now, I think for me, and I know in your hearts you're probably feeling the same thing, we can't just go back to that place we were. It's not that we can't do the same things, but maybe, just maybe, we're supposed to do it differently. And so, the more I meditate on this, I go, hey, there's 3 things that we can do from a personal perspective and then as a church or corporately as a church around the world, okay? And it just clicked for me. Because remember, we've been talking about being havens, and that idea of havens being that safe place. Before everything happened, we had this vision, man, we have to be that safe place. And the components of haven really is not just the form of the hardware of a haven, but the components of it is really the operating system. It's our ethic of how we do life together, how we worship God. What does that worship look like? Well, God breaks it down for us. He breaks it down in the Old Testament, New Testament. It's justice. But then how do you refine it down to practical implications? And I think there's 3 things that we could address, again, personally and as a church. The first thing is this idea of communion. In Luke chapter 22, verse 19, he said he took some bread and he gave thanks to God. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He tells us to take communion often. And usually there's a reductionism when it comes to communion, where we reduce it to just a quick moment in time where you get a stale piece of bread and then you get a little bit of grape juice. It's not the picture of a biblical communion. Communion is a part of the Lord's Supper, right? Imagine that picture. He's eating the Lord's Supper. It's a table and they're having a love feast. We're supposed to have love feasts together more. We're supposed to sit down and pause enough, not fast food it, but you pause enough to sit down, put the phones aside, and you're paying attention to each other. You're listening to each other. Communion. I said, man, we need more of that. Our families just start to eat together more. Maybe regularly scheduling dinners together, lunches, breakfasts. Maybe with friends too. You can start doing that even now, making sure that, again, check the temperatures, get the test done. But maybe we're supposed to have more communion. That's something we can do personally. How about secondly, well, it's this idea of conversations, right? Conversations are really critical. Again, with havens, we talked about meaningful conversations. In the Bible, you'll see all throughout the scriptures, this need to love one another, to encourage one another, to build each other up. Why is this important? It's because we think sometimes we only hear God through preaching or maybe in an audible voice. But one of the things that we're neglecting the most when it comes, I believe, to God speaking to us? It's conversations with people. Come on, think about it. People are called ones that are made in the imago Dei, the image of God. So people are like these masterpieces of God that are portals of God's heart. Christian or not, they reflect his image, his character, his power, his energy. So from a human, practical level, how can we maybe best know God? Well, it's still the other things like the Word of God. It's going to be through, listening to Scripture. But could it be there's this other muscle of interacting with other people in deeper ways? Whoa. You see, we've moved to the place And there's a really great documentary that just came out called The Social Dilemma about the impact of technology and digital screens and social media on young people, which is causing more depression, more suicides, more self-esteem issues. I mean, all types of trouble. And these are the people who invented the major platforms that we're now using. Could it be that God in this moment is wanting us to exercise these other muscles of conversations, not just someone preaching at somebody or trying to sell something, but maybe the conversation through the ones that are reflecting God's image is about learning how to listen to God through people. And the only way we're going to do that is by intentionally spending time with other people. Now, what's important is to note, because it's really easy to think about, hey, I'm going to call my friends. You're right, man. I'll call my buddies, my Christian buddies from church. Yes, please do that. But also what's significant is the conversations we have to have with people not like us. See, that's what Luke 10 is all about. It's someone loving a culture that actually hated him. There was racism going on. So the one who was hurt was the racist. The Samaritan was the one who transcended that and went and spent time with the racist. So if we could take this from a bigger macro picture, it's learning to spend time with not only people that maybe have hurt you. Again, it's not putting yourself in physical danger. Don't do that. But the idea is, like, if someone's betrayed you or emotionally discouraged you in some way, at some point at the right moment, don't be afraid to go address it. Go deal with it. But it also has to deal with our culture. People that are brown, that are black, people who are Asian or of Indian descent, whatever person is like in our area of a different culture, our conversations should be about connecting with them. And what should we do? You don't have to worry about using your mouth as much. It's about listening. And then as you listen, it's about action. You see, justice is the hard work of love. It's about taking what you see, what you hear, and then just like the Samaritan, he responded to the visual. He couldn't keep going on. He couldn't go back to normal. He had to stop, but he took action. See, worship is not simply a proclamation of something or us sitting in a building 2 hours in the week. It's actually an activation of our lives all throughout the week. It's learning how to be in the presence of God. So worship is not defined just, again, to a time segment in a one-dimensional place. But worship is everywhere we go, recognizing the presence of God, saying that as we live our lives, that God's worth it, man. He's the one I enjoy. He's the one that's giving me joy right now. And you just love people. It's activating that. But it's being a just person with your conversations and also, again, in your communion. And there's one more thing that we alluded to that's important personally, and that is generous activity. The Samaritan made sure to bandage them. So again, the most priceless commodity we have is to pause and to give someone our time. So it's not even our money, right? It's first our time. It's the most valuable thing we have. So when you spend time and focus on somebody and you're listening, you're learning, and then when you see a need, you're helping to bandage if you're supposed to. You're coming along, and then you're helping to transport, give access to resources that maybe that person doesn't have or couldn't get right now. When we start to do that, what is that? It's worship. So I believe this moment is really a moment we're supposed to get a much broader, beautiful picture of worship. It doesn't have to be relegated to one day. God said, hey, during this pandemic, this is my belief, during this pandemic, this pause is for you to see that there's other muscles that need to be developed, not just your lips or your ears. It's your activation of your life so that you don't have to look at your life as maybe like, 20% of your life is like God time. You could look at it like your whole life could be that. Imagine walking with God, feeling His presence, tapping into His supernatural power, seeing healings happen, people's lives transform, just simply as you do justice, as you reflect life, love, and you generously give. This is really the work of God. This is worship. So what does this mean for Newsong? All right, because we had our family here, and I know, man, I feel it too. I want to get back together. I love our family. We have such a unique community. It's wonderful. But if we follow those three initiatives, the personal ones that we're going to do of communion, conversations, and generous activity, how about if we do this? This is what we're planning in October. Okay, so we're going to start. I'm going to announce it right here. We're going to start doing public gatherings. all right? We're going to start it. But we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to exercise our other muscles of worship. Because I want you to see how powerful it is, not just to sit and listen to one person's sermon, but what if you could hear multiple sermons from your friends? So here you go. Here's the 3 initiatives that we're going to pursue starting in October. We're going to try it out, all right? So number 1, it's communion. We're going to have public gatherings on Sundays, just like at our worship time. We haven't decided exactly what time, sometime in the morning. We're going to have us gather together to do what? To take the Lord's Supper, to have a love feast. What's so great about our family at Newsong is we have some pretty great cooks. I mean, some chefs extraordinaire from the local restaurants. These are the great restaurants nearby us. We have collaborative partners that Seeds and Sparks, our community that cooks for us every Sunday when we're in person. They can lead us and they're going to cook for us. They're going to help curate the collaborations. We're going to eat together. So let's just come to eat together. Again, with social distancing, with masks, all the physical things that we need to be careful about. But let's sit down and eat together. All right? If you're sick or you're still struggling, or you have questions about your health, then please stay home. We want you to get better. But if you're well, you're ready for social interaction. Not everybody has to do this. Don't feel any guilt or shame because, again, some of us, we'd rather just stay at home still to be totally safe. That's no problem. But there's a good group of people we're finding in our communities, like 30 to 50%, that are ready to say, you know what, I'm ready to come back together. But again, utilizing the social precautions. So we're going to do that. So we're going to have a love feast. We're going to do communion together because as we eat together, we remember Jesus. We feel his presence. And by the way, we're going to do a second thing here. We're going to have conversations. So the second initiative of conversations is we're going to hear each other's stories. So when you're sitting around the table, you're eating, ask each person around the table, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. What were some of the painful things you've gone through or some of the highlights? Tell me more about you. And we're just going to listen without judgment. We're going to start to appreciate. Yeah, conversations, but not just with people that we know from Newsong, which is going to be great. It's going to be like a reunion. But this is what we're going to do. And I got really excited about this. I asked Maribel, I said, how many neighborhoods are around Newsong and Santa Ana? And she said 4. And then if you count the senior center, which is right down the road, this big high-rise building that's within walking distance, it's 5. And then it's not even counting schools, elementary schools or Santa Ana College. You probably could add 5 more type of neighborhoods or networks. I said, what if we do this? What if the conversations we have are not just with us, but it's us like being like the Samaritan and going to another culture and us getting to know our neighbors. So this is our plan. One of our most attended things that we've done during the pandemic is the prayer walk. So, we're going to eat together, but one of the activities that we're going to do for the next few weeks is our hope is we're going to pick a neighborhood and we're going to do like prayer walks through the neighborhood. This asks God to bless the neighborhood. And then if possible, maybe we'll see some neighbors and we can just say hi. And there may be some neighbors that just want to talk. Who are you guys? Like, what are you doing? And we can just say, hey, we're Newsong down the street and we love you guys. Any way we can support you, let us know. Because, our church is meant to serve the community. We're going to do these prayer walks. So we're going to activate it. We're going to use the muscles of our feet and our hands to be generous to people around us. And maybe what we can do too, possibly, instead of people coming to us for food, maybe sometimes we can prepare even baskets of food from our houses or baskets of food here at Newsong, and then we pass it out as we go to the neighborhoods. That's what Jesus did. If you look at his life, more than inviting people to a building and to a service, he was inviting people to himself. He was being the presence of God in the city, in the community. His worship was constant. He was always looking for where the Father's working. And then the third thing as a church, that's I think really big. So we talk about conversations that we're going to have. We'll do prayer walks. We're going to eat around the table, do the Lord's table, communion. But the third thing, what are we going to do? We're going to be focused upon generous giving, a generous activation. I'm so proud of Newsong because the church has done such great things that the leadership of Rahana, the team, the leadership team here, the board. Literally, when you give to Newsong, the money doesn't go mostly to the buildings at all. That's paid for by our leasing. The money that people give, that resource, is going towards like the people who are leading the movements, who are equipping you, who are teaching you, who are training you. It goes towards the ministry needs. And so to me, I'm really proud that we've shifted that. I'm proud of the fact that we moved from Irvine into Santa Ana because we said we want to be with those different than us. I'm proud of the fact that we have the Mix Academy. We're feeding a couple thousand people a week. I mean, there's a lot of great things. And we're even doing like an academy where you can take different classes. You can learn how to make cookies. I mean, you can learn how to do like craft stuff. We have people teaching like guitar lessons. I mean, all types of stuff where it's our people. But I think what we could do too, as we look to the future when we think about generosity, what if we continue to develop people? What if instead of just having like internships, we have residencies where those who lose jobs, those are looking to pivot, because that's going to happen more in the next 5 or 10 years. What if we started training people like this is an academy, an incubator on getting ready for what's ahead so that they have a spiritual IQ, we call it SQ, and they're able to engage the world not just from the typical way of the past, where worship's just on Sunday and then it's their real work during the week, but what if we could help develop people in our incubator, in our residency model, where you can come and you can learn and volunteer, and then we could help serve you by equipping you to know how to lead in the world. We like to do residencies like that. We like to create a venture fund, an angel fund. I've already talked to some really great finance people who are putting together a model for us to be able to not just support like missionaries and pastors, but what if we support entrepreneurs and your great ideas? We're close to launching this by the beginning of next year. It's so crazy. It's a dream that's come true. So there's generous activity that we can do as a church. And I'm sure as you spend time with God, God will give you more ideas that we can share amongst each other. So as a church, what are we going to do? We're going to do the communion. We're going to eat together starting in October. We'll gather together to have a love feast, a true Lord's Supper. And then secondly, we're going to have conversations with each other, but then with our neighbors, people not like us. And you may want to invite friends who don't normally connect to God. Bring them to this. It's going to be wonderful. And then thirdly, we're going to relook and examine our generous activity. I mean, if there's ever time to give, man, we should be giving everything right now. This is such a moment that people are spiritually hungry. So, my sister, I want to honor her. She's been by my side for 50 plus years. Here's a picture of her I want to show you, okay? She celebrated her birthday this past week. And, my daughter found this picture, and I looked at it, and I love the picture. Just take a look at this. You see Chong there, she is so happy. She's laughing. And when I look at that, it brought tears in my eyes because that's the way my sister's been, like, ever since I've known her. She's, somehow, some way, it's like I was like one of the apples of her eye. Somehow, some way, she never sees, like, the bad I do. And I got plenty of bad. I got a lot of stuff that's not healthy. But she never pointed those things out with me, never. She always saw the good in me. She always saw what I could become, not just where I was. When the stuff went down and my world turned upside down, when my mom and dad divorced, when my mom was drinking, and when there were struggles in our family when I was a kid, my sister became like my mom. When I went to university and she couldn't go, she was the one working, helping to support me, so that I could finish university. When I had doubts about my speaking abilities, because I'm an introvert, I have to always have these self-talks, even to this day, to get up there and share and think confidently, all the stuff. When I was struggling with my identity and whether I could even speak in front of anybody in high school, I would say stuff, but my sister would come up to me, even though I know I flubbed up, and said, "Dave, that was so great. You're going to be a great communicator. Way to go. That was awesome." My sister has cheered me on ever since I was a kid. And not only has she done that, but you know what else my sister Chong has done that a lot of you don't know? Every time I had to move after I graduated from seminary, every time I moved to a different position, my sister and her family, her husband Eric, who's like my brother, literal brother, they would move too. They would have their business built up. They had their network is all established. They would uproot just to come and be with me still. My sister is and was a haven. My sister is and was the Good Samaritan to me. Newsong, this is what we do. We want to worship God not only with our mouths on a Sunday morning during 2 hours. We want to worship God beyond just listen to one preacher give his idea or her idea of an interpretation of Scripture. We want to learn how to interact with one another, because as we interact with one another in our city and those not like us, we do the act of worship, which is justice, which is agape love. Never can we become more like Jesus than when we become like that Good Samaritan, that one who leaves the norm, disrupts things, and stays with the one who's been hurt. Would you bow with me for a word of prayer, and then we'll close with a song. Father, this is something that we all have to figure out, and we're at different places when it comes to this journey during the pandemic. And it's our compulsion, it's our natural reaction, which is not bad, to get back to normal, to offer ourselves a sense of security again. But God, I look at this period of time, and it seems like it keeps going on, and there's a talk of a resurgence again, another rise of reaction, and of people getting sick in the fall, along with the flu. So this doesn't seem like it's going away. And God, we know you didn't cause this, but we know you could transform this, that you could allow this to be a greenhouse for us, that we don't have to stop growing, that there's other muscles that you want us to exercise, to fully experience you. This period of time, I know, wasn't meant to harm us or to discourage us, but to see your beauty, to be faithful in the things that you called us to do and become. So Father, help us to love you with all our heart, soul, and mind every day of the week. Help us not to exercise just with our lips, but with our lives. Help us to hear your voice, not just through a sermon, but help us to hear your voice through one another as we hear the stories amongst each other in our communities. God, awaken these muscles in us, stimulate them in a way that we can vigorously use them, so that when that moment comes, when we're going back to the routines again, that we are changed then, that we become totally new, and we have this fuller, beautiful understanding of what life is with you every day of the week. We don't have to wait till we get to heaven to enjoy your presence, to enjoy you. We can do it now. So God, we claim that for our lives. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
with